Hi, in this video I wanted to give you more information about clause 6.2 of ISO standards that relate to management systems. Now, as you might know, clause 6.2 relates to the objectives, okay? And for example, for ISO 9001, clause 6.2 talks about quality objectives. Naturally, for other standards, for example, for ISO 45001, clause 6.2 would be talking about health and safety standards. ISO 14001, which is an environmental management system, would have clause 6.2 talk about environmental objectives. Having said that, the main concept that is being conveyed here is that clause 6.2 talks about objectives of the respective management system that is being dealt with in that particular standard. Now, I wanted to explain the mindset and logic that we have to use when implementing such standards within our organization, okay? And how we can go about specifically implementing clause 6.2. So, first of all, I believe that this particular clause is one of the most important elements of ISO standards as management systems. Why is that? That is because I believe that if everyone within the organization has the same common objectives and same common goals, which are explicitly communicated, and therefore everyone knows what target the company is trying to reach, then there's going to be a much higher possibility and probability that people will work towards actually reaching those particular standards. If the organization, on the other hand, does not give clear instructions of what the objectives of the organization are, then it's very hard for people within the organization to actually pull the same rope like everyone else to make sure that those specific objectives are being reached. Okay, so the first point that I wanted to make is that objectives in general, both in business and even in life, are extremely important for us and for our organizations to reach our objectives. Okay? And when it comes to ISO standards, therefore, the most important thing when it comes to a management system is that we take decisions based on data. Okay, this is one of the 7 principles of quality management. However, this idea is not only pertaining to quality management systems based on ISO 9001, but also for other ISO standards as management systems. And having a factual approach to decision making means that people within the organization are taking decisions based on numbers rather than based on opinions. And if I were to tell you, for example, that we've had a lot of complaints last year, that might mean something to you and it might mean something completely different to someone else. But if I were to tell you that we've had 7 complaints last year, that will give you more information and you and the other person in this example have a more factual approach to decision making. Taking it a step further and saying that we've had 0.47% of our clients who have paid for us for our services to complain about the products or services that we sell, then we have a much more finite and understandable figure that we can talk about, which isn't subjective on volumes or on the number of clients, but it's an actual ratio. And what I'm trying to say is that if we take this factual approach to decision making, then when discussing ways in which we can improve our management system, then we're going to have a much more concrete way on which we can base our conversations, and more importantly, we can track year over year the performance of our organization to make sure that we are headed in the right direction. Now, objectives have to be important for the organization. And what this means is that objectives have to be in line with the strategic objectives of the organization in terms of quality, okay, when it comes to the quality management system. However, this relates to the overall vision of the organization. Okay, so if the organization's vision is, for example, to reduce the carbon footprint, therefore, having environmental objectives that make sure that we are reducing our carbon emission, for example, will definitely be in line with the overall objectives of the organization to reduce or to minimize the carbon footprint that is being set within the organization. So it's very important for the organization to make sure that any objectives for any management system that you are implementing, you do not create any objectives because the standards needs that particular objective. Okay, it's very important to create objectives that are relevant for your organization. And as with any other requirement of ISO standards, it is very important to create a management system that is suitable for the needs of your organization, not for the needs of the standard itself or for the auditor or for the consultant that you are working with. Make sure that you are always creating a management system in a way that will help your organization to work in a more efficient and effective way rather than to increase bureaucracy and reduce the number of transactions that you can do in any given day. Okay? So, moving forward, objectives have, when it comes to quality, be relevant to customer satisfaction. Okay? So, when it comes to ISO 9001, which is, first of all, the most commonly implemented standard in most organizations, okay? And it relates to quality. Therefore, some organizations choose to create objectives not just relating to quality, but also on other topics, as we'll see in the examples that we have later on in this presentation. So here we can have objectives relating to sales, relating to HR, relating to operations. However, the most important thing is that for a quality management system, we would have objectives relating to, for example, customer satisfaction or other metrics relating to quality. When it comes to environmental objectives, we need to have objectives relating to the environment. Granted, we can have objectives, for example, relating to the training hours that people will get on the environment. However, it's very important for us to have objectives that are more specific about our actual environmental performance. For example, the number of electrical energy units that we are consuming, the number of units of water that we are consuming, the fuel, waste generated, okay? So these are objectives that are relevant to the management system, in this case an environmental management system that we are creating, okay? And as you can see, we do not need to create any specific type of objectives because the standard can be used by any type of organization in any industry employing any number of employees. Therefore, the standard will never tell you how you have to meet a requirement. It is up to the management team within your organization and your consultant and trainer who is helping you to identify the most relevant objectives for your organization. So what will you need to do to meet the requirements of the standard? First of all, we will need to define SMART objectives, okay? And I'm going to explain in this presentation what SMART objectives are and how you can use them within your organization. We will then need to make sure that we are allocating enough resources to make sure that we are actually reaching our objectives. And when we are referring to objectives, we are not only referring to money, but we are also referring to the time of employees and other equipment, for example, that might be required for us to reach these objectives. So first we need to have SMART objectives, then we need to allocate the resources. Third, we need to make sure that we are actually collecting the data relating to our objectives. If we are not collecting data and we just set up objectives and let them there on some Word document, they will add absolutely no value to your organization. However, if you have defined what is important in your organization, transformed those ideas into SMART objectives, and you are actively tracking the data that will show you whether you are reaching those objectives or not, then invariably your organization will improve, as you will make sure that you are headed into the right direction. And over here I wanted to take a side note, because sometimes clients tell me we shouldn't put in hard objectives for us to reach. Actually, we should put in very lenient objectives for us to reach, to make sure that we actually reach these objectives. And that is one concept that you can apply within your management system. However, I wanted to give you that peace of mind that basically when it comes to objectives, the standard does not tell you that you must reach the objectives, okay? And that if you do not reach the objectives, as if someone will come and take your ISO certification. That is not how it works. If, for example, you set out a particular objective and you do not meet that particular objective, then what an auditor will want to see is that you are taking some type of action to actually reach the objective in the following year, or that you would have adjusted the objective to make it more attainable and suitable to the resources that you can allocate as an organization to that particular objective. Okay? So, the 4 things that we need to do to meet the requirement of this particular clause 6.2 for all ISO management systems, is that first of all, we need to have smart objectives. We need to allocate the necessary resources to meet that particular requirement. We will then need to set up the systems to collect the data, and we need to make sure that we actually store that information on some type of document that allows us to track from one period to the next to notice any trends within our organization. So, what will we need to do to implement this particular requirement within the standard? First of all, we need to determine what type of quality objectives for ISO 9001, or environmental objectives, or health and safety objectives, or information security objectives, or energy management objectives. For all type of ISO management systems, we'll need to define what objectives we want to track. And secondly, we need to set up smart objectives. So as I have explained earlier, when it comes to ISO 9001, we need to have objectives relating to quality, but we can have other objectives, for example, relating to sales, relating to HR, relating to the financial performance of the organization, or relating to the key processes of the organization, which, as you might have seen in another video on this channel, relates to the sales process, the purchasing process, the operational processes, and the design and development process. Okay? And when it comes to other management systems, okay, when it comes to health and safety, environment, information security, we need to have specific objectives relating to that particular organization. Okay? Actually, standard, excuse me. So, coming up with these objectives shouldn't be very hard. Okay, so for example, when it comes to information security, we can give example objectives relating, for example, to the number of phishing emails that we receive, the number of hours that people are allocated to train on information security. It can be the number of vulnerabilities we have in the pen test or vulnerability testing, and the rating for each penetration test. For example, we want to have 0 high risk, 0 medium risk, and 1 low risk, for example, in our vulnerability testing. Okay, so as you can see, coming up with these objectives will vary depending on the needs of the organization and what you think that actually makes sense for you. Okay, so once you would have defined an overall understanding of what objectives you'd like to have in your organization for the specific management system that you'd like to have, then we will need to convert those objectives into smart objectives. Okay, and what are smart objectives? SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound. Okay? So, when we are talking about specific, we mean that we cannot have very vague objectives Actually, on the contrary, we need to have specific objectives, talking about a particular point, okay? For example, we shouldn't say we want to have more sales, but we have to say we want more sales of that particular product in that particular industry, for example, okay? Secondly, it has to be measurable. So we shouldn't say we want more sales in that particular topic. Rather, we should say we want a 5%, 10%, 25% increase in our sales. Or we want to, maybe we would want to reach a specific value for a sales target. Okay, so as long as we are able to actually count the objective, then it would be measurable. The third point is attainable. Okay, it is useless for us to say that we want to increase our, for example, revenue by 3,000% unless we know that a drastic change will happen. Okay, so we have to make sure that whatever objectives we define, they are actually attainable for the resources that we are going to allocate to reach that particular objective within our organization. The next topic is relevant, and as I have explained earlier, it's very important for these objectives to be relevant to the overall needs of the organization. If they are not relevant, then everyone is going to understand that they are not relevant, and no one will give the necessary input and effort and allocate the necessary resources to reach that particular objective. And finally, it's very important for these objectives to have a specific deadline. Okay? So, just to give you an example, we can say, I want to run 5 kilometers in 25 minutes. Okay? Actually, excuse me. We can say, I want to run more. Okay? That can be an actual objective that a person might have, but that would not be a SMART objective. Okay? So, if we were to use the concept of SMART objectives, then we're going to say, so we want to be specific. So we're not just going to say, I want to run more. What is more? We're going to say, I want to run 5 kilometers. Okay? Measurable, we want to say that we want to achieve that type of running, that type of speed in 25 minutes. Okay? Attainable, and here you need to determine whether this is relevant for you or not, in the sense that if you are currently running 5 kilometers in 30 minutes, then possibly running 5 kilometers in 25 minutes might be attainable for you. However, if you've never ran, for example, in your entire life, it might be very hard for you to run 5 kilometers in 25 minutes, unless you did other types of sports. So what I'm trying to say is that you need to determine for your own good self whether that specific objective is attainable by yourselves. Okay? The next topic is that it should be relevant to the needs of the organization. In this case, will running help me? Yes, it will certainly help me, because it will help me in my physical and mental health. And finally, we said that we want to reach this objective within the next 12 months. Okay, so from I want to run more to I want to run 5 kilometers in 25 minutes in the next 12 months. And some concepts that I also wanted to convey in this presentation are that depending on the size and complexity of your organization, you might want to have more specific or more broken down objectives by department, for example, okay? And depending on the size of your organization, then you might have a different type of resources being deployed, okay? I've seen organizations having just a set of 5 objectives, okay? And I've seen other organizations who went into a lot of detail to explain the different concepts of how the objectives should be spread out across the organization. And here you have more examples relating to quality, okay? So for example, it can be to increase the number of revenue that is generated by clients, okay? How likely are clients to recommend us, the number of mistakes or complaints that we receive. And as you can see, they are not clean cut, okay? So it's not that if it's going to be a quality metric, then we only have to speak about the number of defects or rejects that we have as an organization. But it can also be, for example, the revenue that is generated by repeat clients. And invariably, if clients are buying from you multiple times, it would mean that they are happy with your service. We can have objectives relating to HR, and we can have objectives relating to sales. As you can see in this presentation, the most important thing is that we should keep in mind the relevant standard that we are willing to get certified to, and after crafting our management system, we would then determine of how can we make sure that we are able to track the improvements that we'd like to achieve in our management system within that particular focus. And once we have that in mind, then we can come up with objectives and we can convert those into SMART objectives. That is all I had for you in this video. If you have any questions about how you can implement objectives within your organization relating to any of the ISO management systems, I would be very happy to help you, and feel free to get in touch because I would love to help you succeed in implementing the management systems within your organization. Thank you so much.